House Speaker Mike Johnson is expressing confidence ahead of a closely watched vote set for tomorrow that will determine whether he leads the House during the 119th Congress. It's an early test of Republican unity and President-elect Trump's influence on the party that could foreshadow battles to come. And President Biden has announced 20 individuals who will receive the Presidential Citizens Medal. One notable honoree, former Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney, who became a top enemy for Trump after sitting on the January 6th House panel. More on that in a little bit. Joining us to discuss all that and more, Niall Stanage, White House columnist here at The Hill. Let's talk about Johnson first. He's telling reporters today that he's going to get it done, but there is already one committed Republican no vote. Johnson can't afford any more defections. About a dozen Republicans so far non-committal. You think Johnson has the votes?
I don't think he has the votes right now, but I think his big advantage is his opponents within the Republican conference don't have anybody else who they can obviously coalesce behind. And so they in turn are drawing some criticism from people who say they're just kind of creating a disturbance, creating noise, as former Speaker Newt Gingrich put it, rather than actually suggesting they have a plan for a way forward.
Johnson says he's been having some productive conversations with these non-committed members. He says things are going to be different now that they hold the Republican trifecta here in Washington. Even if he's confirmed, is this merely a temporary stay on a further execution to be happen later when big fights come over things like government funding, the debt ceiling?
He's in a very difficult position simply because of the math in the House. Republicans have such a narrow majority. That's why he can afford to lose no more than the one person, Thomas Massie, who has already said he will vote for someone else. So when the ball gets further down the road and there are other fights, it's going to be very difficult to keep the Republican conference together, not only because you have the harder right faction, but because you do have Republicans at the other end of the spectrum who have to be mindful of their position representing more purple districts, more competitive, even some more Democratic-leaning districts.
Are Democrats happy to sit back and watch this fight play out? They've been mad about this new House rule that will prevent Democrats from participating in a potential vote to oust Johnson in the next Congress. Does that mean that Democrats are unified in their opposition? They're just going to sit back and keep voting for Hakeem Jeffries?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think Democrats are quite happy about that. The Democratic strategist James Carville used to say, if your opponent is drowning, throw them an anvil, and there's that kind of mentality that there's no reason for the Democrats to get overly concerned about Republican difficulties or Republican chaos. Democrats are almost uniformly behind Hakeem Jeffries. He's not ultimately going to be the Speaker. I mean, that seems just inconceivable, but they will just keep casting those votes and let Republicans worry about Republicans.
Let's talk more about Democrats. They got problems of their own. Just a few years ago, it strikes me that the liberal wing of the party was kind of flexing its muscles. They pushed the party left on things like criminal justice, climate, LGBTQ issues, race issues. Now, progressives seem to be facing something of an existential crisis. They've been blamed, at least partially, for Kamala Harris's loss in the election. Some of the most prominent members of the progressive wing of the party were ousted in this most recent election. It seems like the party wants to shift to the center in coming elections. Where do you think the progressive wing of the party goes?
I think it goes in a more economically populist direction. It's just interesting to me how these lines of left or centre-left have become scrambled, because it is definitely true that a lot of Democrats are wary about some of what is termed identity politics, particularly around the trans issue, and a lot of Democrats don't want to go to the most progressive edge there. On the other hand, there are a lot of people who think the party didn't really connect with people's anger about their economic circumstances. And so a Bernie Sanders type figure does do that. I mean, people can agree or disagree with his policies, but he does have empathy for people who are struggling economically and policy prescriptions aimed at meeting that need.
This debate is playing out in the battle over who's going to lead the DNC. There's going to be a vote next month among Democrats to elect a new DNC chair. Democrats have virtually no power here in Washington now, so this could kind of be seen as the de facto leader of the party. House outgoing, he's the majority leader now. He's going to be the minority leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer. He is putting out his support for Ben Wickler. He's the chair of the Democratic Party in Wisconsin. Ken Martin, another state party official from Minnesota, also seen as a top contender. What do you make of the DNC race, and what is the biggest challenge you think for the new DNC leader?
I think Ben Wickler is probably the favorite, and that status is copper-fastened by Senator Schumer backing him. He seems to have a lot of support within the sort of organizational wing of the party, kind of the establishment, but some more progressive figures as well. I think it is a difficult task for whoever ends up becoming the DNC chair, because the party is quite demoralized. This is a party that has spent 4 or 8 or 9 years warning that President-elect Trump is an active danger to American democracy, a demagogue, and all the rest of it. He has won with his best performance in any of the 3 elections that he has contested. So that means really that rebuilding the party and recovering the idea that it can actually win these elections, I think, is topic A for whoever comes in.
It's a new year and new Congress. Some new confirmation battles are going to be heating up for Trump's cabinet picks. Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, RFK Jr., Kash Patel, probably seen as the most conservative. I think conventional wisdom on the Capitol Hill maybe says that Gabbard is now has the biggest hill to climb. In the light of this terrorist attack that we saw in New Orleans, I wonder if there's going to be a new emphasis on national security issues and whether or not that may have impact on some of these picks that pertain to that issue.
I think there will be that kind of impetus, and I think that the political ramifications of that could go one of 2 ways. One, which would be helpful to someone like Tulsi Gabbard, would be if there was this idea that we can't have posts vacant, or we can't be in a state of limbo whenever we see in such dramatic and tragic terms the dangers. The other way, though, it could break is particularly more conventional Republicans deepening their skepticism about someone like Gabbard, who is very unconventional by Republican standards, and of course she's a former Democratic congresswoman before changing party. So that would be where the danger resides from her, people becoming even more wary of the kind of foreign policy and national security viewpoint she represents.
Republican senators didn't seem to be too impressed with her during their meetings with her before the break. President Biden is going to award the Presidential Citizens Medal to 20 people today at the White House. Among them, Liz Cheney, Benny Thompson, 2 members of the congressional committee that investigated the January 6th attack at the Capitol. Is Biden going to be stapling pardons to those medals?
Well, maybe so. I mean, it is an interesting move to make. To my mind, it's almost like a halfway house between the full preemptive pardon and doing nothing, because it in a sense makes it more difficult to take action against those people if that's what Trump wants to do. They are now going to be recipients of the Presidential Citizens Medal, obviously an example of a president extolling their achievements in that way. So it is clearly lauding them for their work on the January the 6th committee. Obviously that is not a view that the president-elect shares whatsoever, so we'll see if he does take action.
I want to talk about the U.S. debt ceiling. It was reinstated today. Later this month, the Treasury Department says it will begin taking what it calls extraordinary measures to prevent a default. That can go on, I guess, until sometime this summer, when the debt ceiling would actually need to be raised, unless the U.S. would risk a default. This is going to be one of the big challenges facing Republicans. We talked about this previously, but some major divides within the party and not necessarily a clear path forward.
No, that's right. I mean, traditionally, the warning about the debt ceiling has always been that the United States can't risk a default, that would be catastrophic for the credit and the credibility of the United States, and would have all sorts of reverberations across the global economy. But you do have people in the Republican Party who think those fears are overblown and exaggerated, and as we were talking about a few moments ago, the fact that the math is so balanced on a knife edge does make all of this stuff more difficult.
Any chance that Democrats, who have traditionally said they're not a fan of this debt ceiling fiasco that comes up every few years, to partner with Republicans and Trump to just do away with it?
It's theoretically possible. I just don't know how willing Democrats would be to allow then President Trump, as he would be, free rein on that sort of issue. I don't think they would really want to hand him the victory, even though there is a very important kind of academic debate about whether the debt ceiling really makes sense, because this is not about government spending. The money has been spent in a sense. This is about whether you expand the limit on the credit card to allow the debt to be paid.
All right, that's all I got for you. Niall Stanage, White House columnist here at The Hill. Thanks so much.
Good to see you.
And now the latest on the attacks in New Orleans, the attack in New Orleans that left at least 15 people killed and dozens injured after a man rammed a pickup truck into a crowd on Bourbon Street. Authorities have identified a 42-year-old Army veteran as the suspect and now believe he acted alone. News Nation's Alex Capriello has more on the ground in New Orleans.
Drew, New Orleans officials say it's safe again to reopen Bourbon Street a day after a deadly terrorist attack. New information from the FBI confirming the suspect, who plowed through crowds of people celebrating the New Year in the French Quarter, acted alone, walking back those initial claims that they believed others might have been involved in this attack. Instead, officials say there is no evidence he had co-conspirators. Authorities walking the public through their preliminary timeline. The suspect, Shamsud Din Jabbar, a U.S. Army veteran from Houston, Texas, allegedly rented the Ford F-150 truck in Houston on December 30th, drove it to New Orleans on New Year's Eve, and then sped through the French Quarter, killing 14 people and injuring 35 others. The FBI says he posted at least 5 videos declaring his allegiance to the terrorist group ISIS. Investigators are currently inspecting an Airbnb nearly 2 miles away from Bourbon Street, where they've confirmed Jabbar stayed the nights leading up to the attack. The FBI recovered 3 cell phones and 2 laptops, which are currently being searched for further evidence. At least 2 improvised explosive devices were recovered near Bourbon Street, and law enforcement continues searching for others. The FBI has already received more than 400 tips from the public after this attack, and they're asking for anyone who might have known Jabbar to come forward and tell them more. Drew.
Thank you, Alex Capriello. The New Orleans Police Department has also revealed that the Sugar Bowl will feature a heightened level of security equal to that of the Super Bowl following the attacks. Police Superintendent Ann Kirkpatrick says there will be hundreds of officers and staff lining the streets. And the latest on the Tesla Cybertruck explosion outside President-elect Donald Trump's hotel in Las Vegas. Law enforcement officials have identified the man who died in the explosion as Matthew Livelsberger, a highly decorated U.S. Army Green Beret who deployed to Afghanistan twice. Livelsberger had served in the Army since 2006, including overseas in Ukraine, Tajikistan, Georgia, and the Congo. He also was awarded 2 Bronze Stars, an Army Commendation Medal with Valor, and a Combat Infantry Badge. According to a statement from the Army, Livelsberger was on approved leave when he died. President-elect Trump is pointing the finger at President Biden and his immigration policy in the wake of the 2 violent attacks, but right now the connection doesn't really seem to be relevant. Investigators say both suspects are U.S. citizens. Trump's comments come just weeks before he takes office, with promises of mass deportation and increased border security. Joining me now is the Hill staff writer, Rafael Bernal. Rafael, thanks so much for coming on. You know, the attacker in New Orleans is a U.S. citizen, a veteran born in Texas. Reports say the Vegas attacker was an active-duty Green Beret from Colorado. Investigators have made no connection between the attacks and border policy, but you have Trump, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, some members of Congress using this to kind of justify a crackdown on immigration at the border. What do you make of how this is playing out among the political class?
Well, we're assuming Trump and company have the same information that we do, that makes no link, really 0 link, between the border and between immigration and these attacks. But it shows you how important border and immigration are to Trump's political strategy still today, still even after having won re-election. It's just central because it almost tells you that any issue, whatever it is, including 2 attacks like these, they will try to link it to the border, regardless of whether the information points in that direction or not.
And a lot of times you hear his supporters kind of pivot from that. When they're asked, why bring this up now, they say, well, he's just highlighting that this is also an important issue. And if you read closely in the message that he posts, he's not really making a direct link. But you have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. She came out and said that the truck that was used in the attack was seen crossing the border, or was registered crossing the border. It was actually a rental truck that was previously crossed ostensibly with another driver in it. I just wonder if you think like this disinformation in some cases and kind of just coming up close to the line of what is not true when implicating these broader issues, is that dangerous?
It can be. It is dangerous because there are a lot of people who follow them and who follow them very passionately and who could get the wrong idea about foreign nationals or people who look foreign, people who look like immigrants. And we have heard an increase in that kind of attack. We saw, it's similar to the anti-Asian hate that we saw rising up during the COVID pandemic. It's that kind of language tends to have, there's no direct link. You can't make one person responsible for another person's behavior. But we have seen sort of this trend where that sort of language at a high political level tends to affect behavior at a national level.
Trump seems to be doubling down on his stance on this, made another post on Truth Social again, kind of seeming to link the cases with immigration. Trump had famously signed this executive order during his first term, dubbed the Muslim travel ban. Do you see actions like that being, where Trump's focus goes in the first 100 days of his new administration? Likely,
yes, because it's politically popular with his base. I mean, if we go back to whether it's truth-based or not, there's a statistic from 1973 to 2023, and I think this held up in 2024. There have been exactly 0 deaths on U.S. soil perpetrated by foreign-born terrorists that crossed the border illegally. 0. It's never happened. But it is very politically salient for him and for his supporters. So you can expect more of that because it has worked in the past. The evidence lies in to keep winning elections.
Yeah, and it seems to be that Americans believe Trump when it comes to the issue of immigration. The latest Gallup poll shows 68% believe he will tackle the issue. That's up 9 points from 2016 when he first took office. Aside from some sort of like a Muslim ban, what do you think are the most immediate changes we'll see when Trump comes into office?
Well, we will see a crackdown in the sense of there will be fewer restrictions on ICE officers to act within the interior. The limitation, of course, there is the budget mainly. But the United States is spending $409 billion, more or less, according to the American Immigration Council, $409 billion on immigration and border enforcement per year. That is due to go up. Trump and his allies will push for that number to go up, but it is a substantial number. So I expect fewer limitations, more action, a little bit more fear in immigrant communities, and more actions that Trump can sell on cable TV, essentially.
Do you think that there will be budgetary constraints that prevent him from taking kind of more aggressive action on immigration? And if not that, maybe constraints from a Congress that can be, has proven to be a little bit unruly at times.
There's no doubt about that there will be budget constraints. Even incoming border czar Tom Homan has said that if they did go ahead with a project to deport everyone who's in the country illegally today, or who entered illegally or overstayed a visa, it would take, he said, about a decade, and they only have 4 years, but they're going to try to make a lot of headway. It's not realistic from a budgetary standpoint or from a logistical standpoint that they would accomplish the entire goal. So necessarily, yes, there will be budgetary limits.
Also, immigration policy related is this H-1B visa issue. What do you make of how that's played out? It's been kind of an interesting battle between factions of the Republican Party. You have on one hand people like Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy advocating the positive benefits of the program. Others on the kind of MAGA hardline wing of the party, Steve Bannon, and people like him saying that it should be completely eliminated. Trump seemed to side with Musk and the Ramaswamy wing.
And Musk later sort of pumped the brakes, realizing that split was really coming out into the open. But that split isn't new. It's been going on in conservative and immigration restrictionist circles for decades, if not basically forever. There is sort of the wing of thought that is immigration is bad, period, or immigration has to be super, super, super low, period. And there is the other wing of thought that is sort of immigration is viewed as just as an economic policy. And so you have to restrict, for example, on family-based immigration. I don't think there will be too much of a split between Musk and, the most restrictionist of the restrictions, between Musk and Stephen Miller. They probably see a very similar vision of family immigration, they probably have a very different view of American companies bringing workers, bringing especially skilled workers. That one side says replaces American workers. The other side says it helps American innovation and grows the economy.
All right, we'll continue to follow that debate moving forward. But Rafael Bernal, thanks so much for your input.
Thanks for having me.
It's just under 20 days until Trump's inauguration, and the president-elect is gearing up for his big day. Trump is set to hold a rally in D.C. the day before his inauguration. The rally will be held at Capital One Arena and is being dubbed a victory rally by Trump. The president-elect has not held a rally in D.C. since January 6, 2021, in his speech on the Ellipse. That speech preceded a mob of his supporters carrying out a violent attack on the U.S. Capitol in an attempt to stop the certification of the 2020 election results. Unemployment claims in the U.S. fell to 211,000 last week, the lowest weekly total since last March. Claims dropped by 9,000 for the week, according to the latest numbers from the Labor Department. Individuals receiving unemployment fell by 52,000, the lowest since September, and now sit at 1.84 million people collecting. Economists called the drop encouraging. The figures suggesting most U.S. workers are continuing to experience unusually high job security. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.